January 18, 1945. A frozen stretch of forest near the Clerf River, Luxembourg. The world has been reduced to the color of ash and the sound of grinding metal. For 3 days, this has been the reality for Anneliese Schmidt, a 21-year-old Luftwaffenhelferin, a Luftwaffe auxiliary. The biting wind carries the scent of pine and diesel fuel, a nauseating combination that clings to the back of the throat. Her gray-blue uniform, once a source of pride, is now stiff with frozen mud and stained with the grime of a desperate retreat. The Great Ardennes Offensive, the last furious gamble of the Third Reich, has broken like a wave against a rock. Now the tide is pulling back, and it is dragging everything with it. Around her, the remnants of a shattered anti-aircraft battery stumble through the snow. There are a dozen of them, women who just weeks ago were tracking Allied bombers in the sky, operating searchlights, or relaying coordinates over crackling field telephones. Now they carry nothing but their exhaustion. Their rifles, old French Lebels issued in a panic, were abandoned miles ago. They are a ghost convoy, their faces pale masks of hunger and fear, their breath pluming in the frigid air. Anneliese, by virtue of her age and a steadiness she does not feel, has become their unofficial leader. She keeps her eyes on Clara, a 17-year-old from Dresden, whose soft, frightened sobs are a constant, quiet counterpoint to the distant rumble of artillery. The sound that freezes them is not the familiar crump of an 88 or the whistle of incoming shells. It is something new, a deep, guttural growl, accompanied by a rhythmic, metallic clatter. It's a sound that seems to come from the very earth itself. Anneliese pushes Clara behind a snow-dusted fir tree, her own heart hammering against her ribs. Through the dense woods, she sees them. The silhouettes are low, wide, and brutally unfamiliar. M4 Sherman tanks, painted olive drab, churning through the undergrowth like prehistoric beasts. They are impossibly loud, impossibly close. The ground shudders with their passing. Behind the tanks, figures move with a practiced, lethal grace. American infantry. They are tall, clad in heavy winter coats, their M1 helmets obscuring their faces. They carry their rifles, the M1 Garand, not shouldered but held at the ready, sweeping the woods. You can see the weariness in their posture, but also a relentless purpose. This is the 28th Infantry Division, the Bloody Bucket, men who were mauled in the Hurtgen Forest and have come back from hell with a grim education in this kind of warfare. A voice, rough and amplified by the cold, cuts through the air. Kommen Sie raus! Hände hoch! The words are a clumsy but understandable command. Come out, hands up. Panic ripples through the small group of women. One starts to bolt, but Anneliese grabbed her arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Running is a death sentence. She knows this. She has seen the bodies littering the roadsides for the past 50 kilometers. She takes a deep breath, the icy air searing her lungs, and steps out from behind the tree. Her hands are raised high, trembling slightly. One by one, the others follow her lead, emerging into a small clearing, their faces a mixture of defiance and terror. The American soldiers surround them quickly, their movements economical, professional. There is no shouting, only the crunch of their boots on the snow and the click of safeties being disengaged. A sergeant with tired eyes and a 3-day stubble approaches Anneliese. He looks them over, his gaze lingering for a moment on their uniforms, a flicker of surprise in his expression. He seems less an aggressor and more a man burdened by an unexpected complication. He says something to the soldier next to him, a corporal with a Thompson submachine gun cradled in his arms. The corporal nods, never taking his eyes on the prisoners. The sergeant, Frank Miller, of Charlie Company, 112th Infantry Regiment, feels a familiar ache in his bones. More prisoners, but these are different. Women, some no older than his sister back in Ohio. He had heard about these auxiliaries, but this was the first time he'd seen them up close. They looked half-starved and frozen solid. He gestures with his rifle. Let's go, move it out. The order is gruff, but not cruel. It is the sound of a man who just wants this day and this war to be over. Anneliese understands the tone, if not the words. She nudges Clara forward, whispering, langsam, ruhig, slowly, calmly. They are marched away from the road, deeper into the forest, swallowed by the endless walls of pine and oak. The Sherman tanks rumble on, their mission elsewhere. For the German women, their war has ended, but a new, terrifying uncertainty has just begun. They are now captives, miles from any recognizable front line, in the hands of an enemy they have been taught to fear above all else, an enemy whose intentions are a complete and terrifying mystery. The only sound is the rhythmic crunch of 20 sets of boots in the snow, a funereal cadence leading them into the unknown. The march feels endless. Every step is a negotiation with frozen muscles and gnawing hunger. The forest is a labyrinth of skeletal trees, their bare branches clawing at a sky the color of slate. Sergeant Miller sets a hard pace. He can't afford to linger. This sector is far from secure. Pockets of German resistance are still being rooted out, and his company is already stretched thin. These prisoners are a logistical nightmare he didn't need. They are another dozen mouths to feed from rations that are already dwindling, another group of bodies to guard when every man is needed on the line. He walks near the front of the small column, his M1 Garand held loosely in his gloved hands, his senses on high alert. He glances back at the women. They are struggling. One of the younger ones, Clara, stumbles in the deep snow, her face pale with exhaustion. A lanky private from Pennsylvania, barely 19 himself, instinctively reaches out to steady her before catching himself, a look of confusion on his face. Miller sees the exchange. He doesn't say anything, but a silent message passes between them. These are not SS fanatics caught in a bunker. They are something else, something that complicates the simple arithmetic of war. Annalise focuses on the back of the American soldier in front of her. She studies his uniform, the way the straps of his pack cut into his shoulders, the small, dark stain on his woolen trousers. She tries to read their captors, to find some clue in their posture or their clipped, guttural English. They are not the monsters from the propaganda newsreels. They are silent, watchful, and overwhelmingly weary. This, she finds, is almost more unnerving. Their professionalism is cold, impersonal. It suggests they are capable of anything, their actions dictated not by emotion, but by grim necessity. You feel the cold seeping not just into your bones, but into your soul. What is the necessity of this moment? What will they do with them? After another hour, they arrive at the American position. It's not a formal camp, but a defensive perimeter established around a ruined stone farmhouse. The roof has collapsed, and one wall has been blown open, but it provides a meager break from the relentless wind. Pup tents are scattered among the trees. A .30 caliber machine gun nest guards the approach, its crew watching the prisoners' arrival with detached curiosity. The smell of wet wool and stale cigarette smoke hangs in the air. This is a temporary home for men who have forgotten what permanence feels like. Miller confers with his lieutenant, a young officer with a map case slung over his shoulder. The lieutenant glances at the women, his expression unreadable. An order is given. The women are herded towards the farmhouse. The main floor is being used as a command post and aid station. Instead, they are directed to a heavy wooden door leading to a root cellar. A corporal pulls it open, revealing a set of steep stone steps descending into darkness. A damp, earthy smell wafts up. "In here," the corporal grunts, gesturing with his head. There is a moment of hesitation. The darkness below feels final. Clara begins to cry again, a thin, hopeless sound. Annalise puts a firm hand on her shoulder. "We must," she says, in German, her voice low but steady. She leads the way, her hand trailing along the cold, damp stone wall as she descends. The others follow, a slow, shuffling procession of ghosts. The cellar is small, perhaps 5 meters square. The air is thick with the smell of mildew and old potatoes. A single slit window, high on one wall and covered with thick cobwebs, lets in a sliver of dying gray light. The last woman is down the steps when the heavy door groans above them. It swings shut, and the sound of a thick wooden bar being dropped into place echoes in the confined space. They are plunged into an almost absolute darkness. The sudden blackness is a physical blow, stealing their breath. For a long moment, there is only the sound of shivering and Clara's muffled sobs. They huddle together for warmth, their shoulders pressed against strangers who have suddenly become their only lifeline. Above them, they can hear the muffled sounds of the American soldiers, the scrape of a boot on the stone floor, a low murmur of conversation. Every sound is a threat. Every moment of silence is a chance for fear to grow, to fester in the cold, oppressive dark. They are trapped, entombed in the earth, waiting for a fate they cannot begin to imagine. The night has just begun, and it promises to be the longest of their lives. Hours pass in the suffocating darkness of the cellar. Time loses its meaning, stretching and compressing in a disorienting rhythm measured only by the growing ache of hunger and the deepening chill that seems to radiate from the very stones. The dozen women have pressed together in a tight cluster on the dirt floor, a small island of shared warmth and terror. The only light is a faint, milky luminescence from the high, narrow window, barely enough to distinguish the shapes of those huddled closest. Every sound from the world above is amplified, distorted by the stone and their own escalating fear. Annalise tries to remain calm, to project an authority she feels slipping away with every passing minute. She can hear the quick, shallow breaths of Clara beside her, the chattering of another woman's teeth. They are all caught in the grip of what they have been told for years. They are prisoners of the Amis, the Americans, an enemy depicted in Joseph Goebbels' propaganda films as degenerate gangsters, brutal and undisciplined, a mongrel army with no respect for the rules of war. They have seen posters of monstrous American soldiers threatening German women and children. Now, those posters have come to life in their minds, colored by the darkness and the unknown. The sounds from the farmhouse above become a terrifying narrative. The low, rumbling cadence of American English is a language they cannot understand, and so their imaginations fill in the blanks. Is that a command being given, an argument, a plan being made for what to do with them? A sudden burst of laughter from one of the soldiers cuts through the cellar like a razor. To the men above, it might be a shared joke, a moment of gallows humor to ward off the misery of the front. To the women below, it sounds predatory, cruel. They imagine the soldiers drinking, celebrating their capture, deciding their fate with casual indifference. You are there with them, in that cellar. You can feel the damp cold of the floor through your thin uniform. You can smell the musty earth and the unwashed fear of the people around you. You listen. A metallic scraping sound from above. Is someone sharpening a knife? The heavy tread of boots moving back and forth, pacing like a caged animal. Is that the guard, or is it someone coming for them? Helga, a quiet, stern woman who had operated a rangefinder, whispers a question that is on everyone's mind. What will they do with us? No one answers. They all know the stories, the rumors that fly around the front. Stories of what happens to captured women, especially those in uniform. Annalise tries to push the thoughts away, to focus on practicalities. We are prisoners of war, she says, her voice a strained whisper. They must follow the conventions. Even as she says it, the words feel hollow, a desperate prayer against a reality she no longer trusts. The Geneva Convention feels a world away from this cold, dark cellar in the middle of a collapsing front. The hunger is a living thing now, a clawing emptiness in their stomachs. They have not eaten a proper meal in 2 days, surviving on a few stale crusts of bread. The cold makes the hunger worse, a constant, draining ache. Their thoughts become feverish, disjointed. They think of home, of warm kitchens and soft beds, images that are now so impossibly remote they feel like scenes from another person's life. Clara begins to weep silently, her body shaking with tremors that have nothing to do with the cold. Annalise puts an arm around her, but the gesture feels inadequate. How do you comfort someone when you are just as terrified yourself? Suddenly, a new sound makes them all go rigid. It is the unmistakable sound of soldiers assembling, of equipment being checked. The metallic click of a rifle bolt sliding home. A low-voiced order from Sergeant Miller, the words indistinct, but the tone sharp, purposeful. The heavy bar on the cellar door is not lifted. The sounds are moving away from the farmhouse, out into the woods. A small measure of relief washes over them, but it is immediately replaced by a new, colder dread. Where are they going? What is happening? The silence that follows is deeper, more profound than before. It is a silence full of anticipation, the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. They wait, holding their breath, listening to the frantic beating of their own hearts in the tomb-like stillness. Then it comes. A single, sharp report that shatters the night. It is not the deep boom of artillery or the chatter of a machine gun. It is the clean, vicious crack of a rifle. It echoes through the frozen trees, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. It is followed by a moment of absolute stillness. In the cellar, a dozen women flinch as one, their blood turning to ice. The echo of the first shot hangs in the frigid air, a single, violent note that seems to vibrate in the very bones of the women huddled in the cellar. For a breathless second, there is only silence, a void where every mind races, trying to process, to deny what they have just heard. Was it a stray shot? A nervous sentry? But the sound was too deliberate, too isolated. It felt like a signal, a beginning. Then a second shot cracks through the night, closer this time, just as sharp and final as the first. A collective gasp ripples through the women. This is no accident. This is controlled. This is methodical. Panic, which had been a low, simmering current, now flashes through the cellar like lightning. Clara makes a small, strangled sound, burying her face in Annalise's shoulder. The propaganda, the whispered fears, the worst imaginable scenarios, they all coalesce into a single, horrifying certainty. They are being executed, one by one. They are being taken out into the forest and shot. Another shot. Crack. Then a fourth. Crack, crack. The rhythm is irregular, sporadic, which is somehow more terrifying than a synchronized volley. It is not the clean military precision of a firing squad. It sounds like butchery. It conjures images of a grim, piecemeal process of soldiers dragging a prisoner out into the snow, a brief, muffled exchange, and then the final, deafening blast. The women imagine their comrades, perhaps those who were quartered separately, being led to their deaths in the dark woods. You can almost feel the walls of the cellar closing in. The darkness is no longer a passive void. It is an active participant, pressing down, suffocating them with dread. Every crack of a rifle from outside is a hammer blow to their last vestiges of hope. Who was that? Was it Greta, the stoic radio operator? Was it Ingrid, the one who always talked about her fiancé on the Eastern Front? They cannot know. They can only listen to the terrifying tally of shots and wait. "They're killing us," a voice whispers in the dark, laced with hysterical disbelief. "Oh God, they are killing us all." The disciplined fear Annalise had fought so hard to maintain finally breaks. Her own mind is a whirlwind of terror. She thinks of her family in Hamburg, of the letters she wrote, promising she was safe, working far behind the lines. She thinks of the absurdity of it all, to survive the bombing raids, the retreat, the capture, only to end like this, shot in a nameless forest by faceless men. The stories of SS atrocities on the Eastern Front, of the Malmedy massacre just weeks before, had it all been true? Was this the American response? An eye for an eye? Another series of shots, faster this time. 5, 6, 7 of them, echoing one after another. It sounds like a frenzy. In the cellar, the last threads of composure snap. Some women are openly sobbing, their cries muffled into their sleeves. Others are frozen, paralyzed by a fear so profound it has stolen their ability to move or speak. Helga, the quiet one, begins rocking back and forth, her lips moving silently. Annalise realizes there is only one thing left to do. If this is the end, they will not meet it cowering in silent terror. They will meet it together. She finds her voice, shaky but clear in the suffocating dark. Vater unser im Himmel, she begins, the opening words of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven. One by one, other voices join hers, fragile, trembling, but unified. Geheiligt werde dein Name. Hallowed be thy name. Their whispered German prayer fills the small space, a desperate appeal for mercy in a world that has none. It is an act of final defiance, a shield of faith against the brutal reality of the gunshots that continue to punctuate the night. Dein Reich komme, dein Wille geschehe, wie im Himmel, so auf Erden. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. The rifle fire outside continues its dreadful, sporadic chorus. With each shot, the women flinch, their prayer faltering for a beat before resuming. They are no longer Luftwaffe auxiliaries. They are no longer soldiers of the Reich. They are simply terrified human beings, huddled in the earth, praying for their souls as they listen to the sound of their own impending deaths. Then, as suddenly as it began, the shooting stops. The silence that descends is absolute, heavier and more menacing than the noise it replaced. The prayer dies on their lips. They listen, every nerve straining. Nothing, no more shots, only the wind sighing through the pines. And then a new sound. The sound they have been dreading more than any other. The crunch of heavy boots on the frozen ground, coming closer, coming directly toward the cellar door. The sound stops. There is a fumbling noise, and then the slow, agonizing scrape of the heavy wooden bar being lifted. The sound of the bar sliding free is the loudest thing the women have ever heard. It is the sound of finality, the sound of the gallows trapdoor swinging open. They shrink back against the far wall of the cellar, a single terrified mass of humanity. Clara's breathing is a series of ragged, desperate gasps. Annalise finds herself holding her breath, her heart a wild drum against her ribs. This is it. The door will open, and a soldier with a pistol or a rifle will stand there, silhouetted against the night, and he will call the first name. The heavy wooden door groans on its hinges, swinging inward. Light floods the cellar, not the harsh beam of a flashlight, but the warm, flickering orange glow of a lantern. For a moment, they are blinded. They raise their hands to shield their eyes, flinching away from the figure standing at the top of the stairs. It is the sergeant, Frank Miller. He is not holding a weapon. In one hand, he holds the lantern, which casts long, dancing shadows across the stone walls. In his other hand is a stack of battered tin mess kits. He peers down into the cellar, his face etched with a familiar weariness, but softened by the lantern light. He sees their terror, the way they are pressed against the wall as if they could melt into the stone itself. A look of confusion crosses his face. He doesn't understand the depth of their fear. To him, the last hour was just business. He clears his throat and speaks, not in a barked command, but in a low, almost gentle voice. Come, come. He gestures with his head, a simple invitation to ascend into the light. No one moves. They are paralyzed, caught between the terror of what they expected and the complete, baffling unreality of what they are seeing. The sergeant sighs, a plume of white vapor in the cold air. He seems to understand that his words are not enough. He turns and says something to someone behind him. A moment later, a smell drifts down the stairwell. It is a smell so alien to their recent experience that it takes a moment to identify. It is the rich, savory, unmistakable aroma of roasting meat. Annalise stares, her mind struggling to reconcile the sound of execution with the smell of a hot meal. It makes no sense. The pieces do not fit. Slowly, cautiously, as if approaching a wild animal, she takes a single step forward, away from the others. She squints up at the American sergeant, trying to read his face, searching for the trick, the brutal deception. But she sees only fatigue and something that looks like impatience. He gestures again, more insistently this time. Essen, he says, using one of the few German words he knows, food. Hesitantly, Annalise begins to climb the stone steps. The other women watch her, their fear warring with a dawning, incredulous hope. She reaches the top and steps out into the farmhouse. The main room is filled with American soldiers. They are gathered around a makeshift fire pit built in the center of the floor, the smoke curling up through the hole in the roof. They look up as she emerges, their faces grimy and unshaven in the firelight. And there, spitted over the flames, is the source of the incredible smell. 2 freshly dressed deer, their skins steaming in the cold. The realization dawns on Annalise with the force of a physical blow. The gunshots, the irregular, sporadic cracks of the M1 Garands echoing through the forest. It wasn't an execution. It was a hunting party. These soldiers, cut off from their own supply lines and just as hungry as their prisoners, had gone out to find their own food. The barrage of shots that the women had interpreted as their death sentence was nothing more than a handful of GIs from Charlie Company bringing down venison for dinner. Her knees feel weak. The terror that has held her in its grip for hours evaporates, leaving behind a hollow, trembling exhaustion. Sergeant Miller hands her a mess kit. It is heavy and warm. It is filled with chunks of roasted deer meat and a scoop of reconstituted potatoes. It is the most beautiful thing she has ever seen. He turns and begins handing out kits to the other women as they slowly, timidly emerge from the cellar, their faces masks of stunned disbelief. They are led to a corner of the room, away from the main group of soldiers, and they sit on the cold stone floor. There are no words. They eat in silence, wolfing down the hot food with trembling hands. The American soldiers mostly ignore them, preoccupied with their own meals, cleaning their rifles, talking in low tones. There is no fraternization, no shared moment of camaraderie. They are still the enemy, still the prisoner. But in this one surreal moment, they are also something else, fellow human beings, sharing the warmth of a fire and the sustenance of a meal in the midst of a world dedicated to their mutual destruction. Annalise looks at the faces of the women around her, streaked with dirt and tears, now illuminated by the fire. Their prayer had been answered, but in a way that no theology could ever explain. It was not a divine intervention, but an act of simple, pragmatic, and wholly unintentional mercy. A mercy born not of compassion, but of the shared, basic human need to survive another frozen night in the war-torn heart of Europe.